my big white jackrabbits here, and a couple of these female Aryan girl rabbits are very qualified, and I think they do a good job. And not only that, they could help your network too. In other words, they could come in, they could maybe be a part of your network, or at least not oppose your objectives, and you know, whatever. See what goes. And one girl there already had the girl in human resources getting her friend a job and at some other position. And so they, you know, I mean, every single one listening to this has had themselves or their parents. Maybe your dad was a fireman and he got someone a job, and that structure is broken down for males, but that structure was very much alive for women. For males, it was only still there. It's only still there in private organizations, or if someone's got some connections and doesn't say it, just does it, you know. But that structure was very much alive for white women, very much alive. And they also, you know, he taught them basically they could achieve anything they want without breaking any rules. And he says, look at the upside. You girls are complaining about a glass ceiling, but there's a cement floor. I mean, no one can fire you. I mean, if they try to fire you, unless you do something blatant and break some rules, which you're not going to do. White women generally don't break rules. They're not running around killing people. They're not running around stealing things. I mean, they're pretty much law-abiding. I mean, if they weren't, they wouldn't be Aryan girl rabbits, and we'd have a whole other set of race issues, right? But he basically gave them all that. Very simple stuff, just putting ideals in their heads. And in return for this, they said that they would look at the resumes. And a few of the people that he had resumes for right there, they said, well, we could already get them in to interview them, whatever. You know, they're very well qualified. They're as qualified as anyone else. And basically put ideals in their heads. That's all he did. He all did was point out the obvious. And I'm going to cut off the story right here, because this should be the third MP3, and what I'm going to do is the third and the fourth MP3 are going to go together, and this is the most important point I'm going to make with you. I just started this conversation. We're going to continue this conversation at the beginning of the next MP3, and this point I'm going to make to you, if you learn anything else, it's the most critical point I'm going to make, and I'm going to make it on the next MP3, because I don't want this MP3 to go 2 hours. So I'm going to split it in half. Basically, we're going to do one lesson over 2 MP3s. But I'm going to end this with an entertaining story. I'm going to end this third MP3 with an entertaining story in Western civilization. It's probably one of the most critical stories in Western civilization. I didn't hear this until I was in my 20s. Yeah, I didn't hear this until you know, I was already way beyond grade school, teenager, even in college. I was out of college before I heard this story. And it's one of the most famous stories in Western civilization that never gets told, in my opinion. There was a time in ancient Greece where there was a big white jackrabbit. He was getting old in age, and he was a philosopher. His name was Parmenides. And this big jackrabbit Parmenides would sit out and he would preach his gospel. He would preach his philosophy. He had a handful of poems, and that's about it. We don't really know a lot about him. But what we do know is that he would stand and preach his gospel all day in the square. But no one paid attention to him. Parmenides didn't have any students. Parmenides didn't have anyone that really liked him or paid attention to him. He was no big deal. He was just your average Joe philosopher in Greece at that time, and let's face it, there's a lot of competition among philosophers in Greece, in ancient Greece. But this white rabbit just sat out, and he would just preach his. And one of his poems was like On Nature or On the Truth or something like that. You can look it up. I don't even know if I have his name correctly. Parmenides. You can look him up. He is you know, you can look him up, but I don't even know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly in Greek. He's not that well known. Not a lot is known about his poems. But one day, after all these years, he never found a student. One day, one little white rabbit pulled up. Yeah, he pulled up, sat back on his haunches, and started scribbling. One little white rabbit took down everything he had to say. One little white rabbit became his student. Parmenides only had one student to note. Parmenides only needed one student. That little white rabbit went on to set the world on fire. Yes, Parmenides one student. Parmenides only had one student, and he went on to set the Western world and all the planet on fire. That little white rabbit's name was Plato. Most of you think that it takes all these people to do all this stuff. No, it doesn't. It only takes a handful. You only need one student. Parmenides only needed one student. He only needed a Plato, and that's all he was looking for. He knew the rules. And that's an important story in Western civilization. Most of you think that very few people ever change the world, when in fact it's the direct opposite. Very few ever do. Hopefully I made a point with you. And this is the end of the third MP3. And this will be continued at the beginning of the fourth. This is the end of another episode of Follow the White Rabbit. Follow the White Rabbit, again, is a game that will teach you practical politics. Practical politics is practical because it is non-voting, which makes it very, very practical. Conventional politics is voting politics or rule-based politics. And the ultimate, of course, is full-spectrum practical politics, engaging and taking down an opponent, a system, by any means necessary, within the rules, within the law, but never breaking them. And this is the end of another episode of Follow the White Rabbit. Thank you for listening.